My blueberry crisp recipe is easy and delicious. For those of you who did not see my cherry crisp video or who don't know what a crisp is in general, a crisp is a type of fruit-based dessert with a crust like a pie or a cobbler, but what makes a crisp is that it's crispy. Instead of a dough that's rolled out flat, a crisp has fruit and then it has a crumble topping made of things like oats and sugar and butter. It's absolutely delicious. If you like pies and cobblers and you like butter, you'll love crisp. If you don't feel like rolling out a crust, but you want pie or cobbler or something like that, and you want a crispy crust, this is for you. Just like with my blueberry pie video, I'm using wild blueberries because they were on sale. Wild blueberries are smaller than normal blueberries. They're a bit sweeter and they have more of a blueberry flavor, if that makes sense. But I'm sure you could use normal frozen blueberries. Maybe you should add another tablespoon of sugar, but honestly, I think you could do exactly what I'm doing with normal blueberries and you would be fine. Here I have 2 cups or 16 ounces or 454 grams of frozen blueberries, the wild blueberries that have been thawed. And to the berries, I am going to add 3/4 of a cup, or as I measure, 160 grams of white sugar, 5 tablespoons or 50 grams of cornstarch, a tablespoon of cinnamon, 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, and 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. The only thing that's really significantly different from the pie is that I'm adding a bit of cinnamon. Most crisp recipes call for spices, cinnamon and or nutmeg. If you want to leave it out, you definitely can. If you want to add more, you can. But honestly, I think 1/4 of a teaspoon in a pie or a cobbler or something like that is enough spice to give it flavor, but not so much that it becomes a blueberry cinnamon crisp or something like that. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to mix everything together to form the blueberry filling, and then I'm going to pour it into my buttered 8x8 casserole dish, and then I am going to work on the crumble topping. You will probably want to leave your butter in the refrigerator because it needs to be cold. I brought it out just so you would see it in the ingredients. I'll show you how to make the topping in a minute. The blueberry filling for the crisp is now in the dish. Looks beautiful. Now let's focus on the crumble topping. I have 1 stick of butter, 113 grams, and what I did is I cut it into maybe first tablespoons and then 1/2 of a tablespoon, like this, and now I'm just going back the other way around. I'm trying to make cubes of butter, but if I don't make exact cubes, that's fine. Really, I'm just trying to chop the butter into small pieces. So like I said, I went through as if I were cutting tablespoons, blocks of butter, and now I'm going back through the other way, like this. And then taking some pieces off and cutting them like that. Like I said, the idea is to make cubes, but if you don't make cubes, just smaller pieces, that's fine. For the filling, remember 1/2 a cup. So 1 stick of butter, which is 1/2 a cup, 113 grams, 1/2 a cup of all-purpose flour, which for me is 75 grams, 1/2 a cup of light brown sugar, which for me is 120 grams, 1/2 a cup of quick cooking oats, 40 grams, and 1/2 a cup of chopped pecans, 60 grams, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. Not all crisp recipes half chopped nuts, but I added a quarter cup to the cherry crisp, and it was very good. It was kind of like a touch of pecan pie in cherries, and it was really, really good. And now I'm going to do half a cup, so half a cup for everything. Get a plate or something that is wide and flat. If you have a pastry cutter, this is very good for that, but if you don't, just take a fork, especially one that has long, I guess you would call these prongs or long teeth, and you are going to put, maybe we'll say half of the nuts and the almonds and the sugar on part of the plate, and you are just going to, now you could do it all at once if you have a big plate, but I think it's easier to do it a little at a time. Just try to mix the topping together a little bit, push that off to the side, and then just take your fork and press down into the butter. And actually it would be easier if you mixed all the dry toppings together, but I did not, so learn from my mistake. Like I said, just take your fork or your pastry cutter and just work the butter down into it. Because what you're trying to do by cutting the butter and then using a fork or pastry cutter to cut into the butter with the crumble toppings is you are trying to make small bits of butter that are covered with the dry ingredients. I just finished making the crumb topping for my blueberry crisp recipe. As you can see, some chunks are larger than others, but that's okay. Once it's in the oven, it will all melt together. Now, as you see, my blueberry filling is here. It's kind of liquidy, but that's totally fine. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take that crumb topping and I'm just going to crumble it on top. My oven is already preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. The crumb topping is now on my blueberry crisp, and I wanted to point out a few things. As you saw, the blueberry filling is definitely watery at this point. It'll thicken up as it cooks, but it is watery now. But as you can see, the crumb topping isn't sinking down into it. So in order to help it not do that, do not press it down. If you notice that you put a little more in one area than another, you can go through and arrange it a little bit. I know I did. But do not take your hand or spatula or anything and mash it down, because then it will not turn out crispy. My blueberry crisp just came out of the oven. It was in at 350 for a full hour. I'm sure you can hear it boiling and see it boiling as well. Listen. It is definitely crispy. I waited about 30 minutes before digging in, and as you are about to hear, there was no doubt it was definitely crispy. Now it's time to dig into my blueberry crisp. It's been cooling. This blueberry crisp recipe with frozen blueberries was incredibly delicious. It was full of blueberry flavor, the bit of lemon juice bringing out the berry flavor even more. The bit of cinnamon added an interesting twist, making this crisp a little bit different from the blueberry pie that I made earlier this summer. As you heard, the crumble topping was extra crispy. The oats and nuts adding a nice bit of crunch. So this dessert had an excellent contrast of not only flavors but also textures. Although this simple blueberry crisp was definitely delicious, although I definitely liked this simple blueberry crisp recipe, I have to say that I think I preferred the sour cherry crisp that I did earlier this summer. The crumble topping in both recipes had a lot of sugar. And I think that the flavor contrast between the sweet topping and the tart fruit and the sour cherry crisp is a bit better. Maybe it's just my personal preference. I really like things that are sweet and tart, like quince paste or lemonade or blackberry pie. That's why, in my opinion, although I think you can make a crisp out of a lot of fruits, I think this concept works best with tart fruits, like Golden Delicious or Granny Smith apples or rhubarb. If you're in the mood for pie, but you want something different, especially something crispy and crunchy, you should definitely make this blueberry crisp recipe with oats. I'm sure you will love it. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.